Hello and welcome to another episode of Billy Watson TV. Today I have the pleasure of chatting with Guy Anderson, the author of the book Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids. We will talk about the Tartarian Empire and the possible repopulation of the world after its collapse with clone children. It's going to be interesting. Welcome to the show.
Well, hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Billy Watson TV. It gives me great pleasure to have a first-time guest on today. I've just discovered him quite recently. I'm quite intrigued by his work. I've actually got his new book called Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids. Great introduction, great welcome, to Guy Anderson. How are you doing, Guy?
I'm really well, thank you, Billy. How are you?
I'm doing not too bad. Thanks for asking. I'm enjoying your book. I've only had it about a week and I've been doing some other interviews and stuff, so I've been catching up, delving into it the last few days. It's really interesting work and I've really enjoyed seeing your videos. I actually interviewed Richard Vobes, and then when I was doing some research for that, I stumbled upon one of your videos there. Then I caught up with I think he's done maybe 4 with him now, and then a few other things, podcasts, and on your Facebook. You've got a Facebook group called Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, and some really interesting stuff gets posted there. It's like a little community building up.
Yeah.
So I've basically been researching Tartaria for a while. It's a very interesting topic,
Yeah, and it's they consider it. What intrigued me with it was when I first started looking into it, most people called it the biggest conspiracy of them all.
Yeah,
and that to me, that's a red flag to a bull.
Well, I've been looking at 30 years down all the rabbit holes, and again, I was aware of this Tartaria thing, but just kind of getting reignited with it after watching your videos again, and then starting to go into it. It's like, oh my god, and this is another huge area that's not really at the forefront of people's minds these days. Maybe chemtrails and various other things people talk about, but actually, when you think about this and you realise our history is his story, a lot of it's fabrication. It really makes you wonder what the hell is going on here, and just the extent of the control and how little we know about our history. And if you don't know your history, you don't really know who you are and that kind of thing, And it kind of leaves us swimming in the dark to a lot of respect. Would you like to give us a little bit of a background to yourself? First of all, you don't hide the fact that you were a Freemason, or maybe still are a Freemason, and now that gets a lot of people with a red flag straight away. So I'm quite glad that there's another guy I like. He's got a book, and he openly admitted he was a Freemason. He kind of basically said he got to the 33rd degree, and it's not as nefarious as is led to believe and all this kind of stuff. But what's your experiences? I know your dad was a Freemason as well, yeah?
Yeah, it's one of those things that, to the best of my knowledge, once you're in, and you can't leave. I mean, you can stop attending, which I did several years ago now. I went back for a brief spell, but that was only because my youngest son wanted to join. He'd been going on about it since he started secondary school. My dad used to lend him books that he probably shouldn't have been reading at that age. But my dad's obsessed, and always has been, with conspiracy theories, and a huge supporter of David Icke at the time when he was being shunned and laughed off the BBC. And
that's when I was going into David Icke, and I got lots of abuse at that time.
Yeah, me too. And it's funny, isn't it? Because I've said in the book, and I've said a few times to people, that no one's laughing at him now.
Yep. It's basically a lot of stuff he said is whether you believe in the reptile thing is the next level, but certainly the meat and potato stuff, that's what I watched one of his videos, and it was he was talking about the Bilderberg Group and the Council on Foreign Relations. Then I put the news on. It's like, well, why have I never heard about that in the news? Not that I watch the news a lot anyway, but it just seemed to me, there's stuff there that nobody's talking about. So why isn't this stuff getting talked about? And then it's definitely a thing, So I just wanted to talk to my friends about that kind of stuff. And then he came along with the reptile thing, and then basically I was telling them the Queen's a reptile, and then that was the end of my reputation.
It's a hard one, isn't it? The interesting thing with all the groups out there, the Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg Group, and Council of 13, the one that I find the strangest of them all is Club of Rome.
Yeah.
Because if you go onto YouTube, you can find podcasts on all of the groups, all of these secret societies. But Club of Rome, all I've ever been able to find on them are their own podcasts that they've put onto YouTube. There is nothing else out there. There's no one talking about them. So they, and I can't believe that that's because no one knows who they are. I think that that is perhaps the most protected of them all. But I suppose we need to go back and talk about the Freemasons, don't we? Because otherwise people are going to say, well, he dodged that one with a misdirection or something there. I joined the Freemasons, and I got to Master Mason, which is the 3rd degree. Right. So 30 away from the top. But they do say, and I've never found anything to substantiate this, but they do say that there are another 33 degrees, which are the dark degrees. I know nothing about that, but I've been told that by several people. I wanted to join because I was fascinated by my dad from a young age. I would watch him, I didn't know at the time, but 7 times a year, wearing a morning suit, going to London with this oversized briefcase. And my mum used to say to him, so you're putting your pinny on, going off to the Girl Guides, are you? And just ridiculed him. And I managed to pick the lock to his briefcase.
Okay.
And got this book out, got his apron out. I put his apron on, and I'm about 12, 13 years old, and I'm reading this book. And the key words in it are abbreviated. And so I didn't really know what I was reading. I could pick bits of it out. I kept seeing King Solomon being referenced. And I wanted to know more. And he just said to me, when you're old enough, if you're still interested, I'll initiate you. You can join. I shall bring you to my lodge, and you can be interviewed and you can join. And it wasn't that's not how I got into it. Oddly, it was actually a neighbour of mine. He started asking me if I was interested when I was about 30 years old. And I went to a couple of their events, and ended up joining a lodge that, fortunately for me, met at the Grand Lodge of the United Kingdom in Great Queen Street in central London. So I was at the headquarters, it's an impressive building. So I saw a lot more, and perhaps met people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. And then I joined a lodge in Northampton where I lived until a few years ago. But I lost interest after about 10 years. I realised that actually what I joined, more so in London, was a mechanism of people in the Met getting promoted through the ranks a lot faster than they perhaps would have been normally. And I'd see it, and I'd see a constable propose his inspector to Freemasonry, and then of course this inspector is indebted. So when the promotion comes up for a sergeant job, he can't overlook his brother.
Yeah,
you can't get away with doing that. So for me, perhaps I joined the wrong lodge, but I'm glad of where we met, because I saw a lot in that building. But it just seemed to me to be exactly what people would think. It's a network of people that on the outside perhaps look like they're doing an awful lot for charity, and they do, for children's charities and children's wards in various hospitals. But
so they didn't travel.
Absolutely, yeah. Are we doing enough to make up for the bad that we've done? But for me, it just seemed like a way of accelerating your career.
Well, that's basically what it is. You know, they do need to have the ground level one, so it kind of provides a friendly face for the public, and anyone can join, and then you get a bit of promotion. It's just folk helping each other in business. Nothing wrong with that. But then again, you don't know. Certain people will get selected the higher up they go to go on to the next level, and then they'll have to do some more things to indebt themselves even more. And that's how they hold the secrets up at those levels. And I believe what you get taught at base levels, changes as you go up, and so you're getting some thing. So you think you're learning it, but then they can twist it further up the chain thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you don't know, because they don't talk about it. If there is a lodge meeting going on, for example, if they're installing a new master, which they do every year, it's progressive. So you start off as what they call a steward. So you're right at the very bottom, you're serving wine and preparing the festive board for the meal at the end of the meeting. You start off there and you work your way up. And whenever they have an installation of a new master, anybody who's not been a master before waits outside. You can't go in and see any of that. And the grip, which is the handshake, which is called a grip, that changes. Each degree has its own grip. So how you would actually hold someone's hand or greet them changes. And of course, you don't know what the next one is. And it's to show your rank, your position. So God only knows what the 33rd degree handshake's like, or the grip. I have absolutely no idea. But I've had people over the years try and guess what it is. And for whatever reason, they always do the same thing. They try and tickle the palm of my hand with one of their fingers and think that that's how you do it. But maybe they're right. Maybe that's what they do at the top. But it's certainly not what I do at the level I'm at. But who knows? I won't be going back. I don't think if they came across my book, I'd be welcome anyway.
Well, I do see quite a few dodgy handshakes going on. A lot of people don't pay attention, but it's like, again, they're flaunting it. It's some kind of mockery as well. Sometimes they're doing it in front of the cameras, thinking that the profane, don't understand this, but we've got a good thing going here. And a lot of politicians do it because it's like a theatre show, and it's just scripted for the masses, but they're just playing the game. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a large part of what we call society has got Freemasonic influence, not least the priests, say, in the justice system.
Absolutely.
Which is a joke these days, somebody standing outside a church silently praying in their head can get arrested. Well, certain other people can go free. But again, it's all projected in such a way in the media, who are obviously in the game as well, to create a narrative, to get a response, problem, reaction, solution, the control, the perception of people to get the response that they want. They're very good at manipulating society.
And hiding in plain sight. I mean, if you look at the Google Mail icon or logo symbol, that's a Freemason's apron. And if you look at an American baseball pitch, that is the set square and compass. So it's subliminally programmed into us from a very young age, wherever you look. I actually painted a picture because I draw and paint a little bit, and I gave it to Richard Vobes, and it was of Uncle Scrooge, Donald Duck's uncle, sat in the opticians, and it's from a cartoon, an old cartoon. And on the wall in the opticians, where you would normally see the eye test with the letters, it actually says, "Ask about the Illuminati."
Right. Wow.
And so it's sort of subliminal, and I think they follow universal law or karma, knowing that hand on heart they told us everything, but they did it in such a way that we would believe it is fiction. But they can actually convince themselves that because they've used the media and Hollywood to tell us exactly what's going on, even if it's just through The Simpsons, that they've done it. They have kept their side of the bargain. They've kept us informed. We just chose to believe it was fiction when it wasn't.
Yeah, you see
The
a lot
Simpsons is probably a good example of that.
We see memes these days. They always say symbolism will be their downfall, and then it's got all these different things where they're basically showing their hand. But yeah, I definitely think that's part of it. And they're very clever at doing it. It's like the news; it doesn't say the truth. To me, the news is a lot of fabrication, but then there's so much truth in the movies. Like you could say, the cinema is like the public kind of notice board where they're telling you there, and they make these movies popular and people go and watch them but don't understand that, like even things like Minority Report and stuff like that, the retina technology and things to tell you pre-predictive programming and they get you used to things that they're going to introduce.
Yeah.
And, again, controlling society. You just wonder, we'll probably get into that a wee bit, like who these people are and how they've got this like, an incredible intelligence behind what they do and how they do it, but it might be lacking in empathy somewhat. So that again, let's go back to the start of your book, and basically it's like, has history been rewritten? And you kind of pick up the date 1776, talking about the Illuminati, which the Bavarian Illuminati with Adam Weishaupt was created. But would you like to talk about just that chapter a wee bit? And
yeah, sure. I mean, that for me, 1776 is important because all of the research I've done on Tartaria shows that that appears to have been when the Tartarian Empire either fell completely, that it came to an end there. I think, if you like, if we were writing a timeline down on paper, that would be the end of that era. But it was also the beginning of New World Order, and the American dollar bill demonstrates this. It clearly shows that it's got New World Order and 1776 on the back in Roman numerals, and obviously in Latin for New World Order. And it seems to be that is when everything changed. And I think for some time after that, there was still traces of the civilization around there, and that's what the Civil Wars and Napoleonic Wars were for. They were to clear up what was left of the civilization, and then you've got things that don't make a lot of sense, like Dresden, the bombing of Dresden, to the extent that they bombed that city, that it was clearly a Tartarian city, and hanging on in there, or actually with Germany, obviously the empire, the Tartarian Empire could quite easily have become the German Empire. They were, Cecil Rhodes and his friends were threatened, or felt threatened, by the technological progress that the Germans were making. And I think that was because they were still operating as a Tartarian country, and these cities may well have been still running with free energy harnessed through the ether. So 1776 seems to be the pivotal point where everything changed, and from then onwards we see an awful lot of death, an awful lot, perhaps in Russia more than anywhere else, but across the world, a lot of death, prisons, asylums and orphanages opening overnight, and the most majestic of buildings too. That defy any common sense or logic, to build something so incredible, to simply house people that society didn't want. It doesn't make any sense at all. So again, I believe that these were Tartarian buildings, but 1776 is the time, I believe, of the last reset. And from what I've researched and people that I've spoken to that are down the same particular rabbit hole as me, say that was a pivotal moment. And we are now in what they call Satan's little season, a 250-year span where people are allowed, with the cabal, the Council of the Council of 13, the Club of Rome, the Illuminati, whoever they are to you, these bloodline families have been given free rein to destroy and do whatever they need to over a 250-year period, which, if we say 1776 was the last great reset, then that would come to an end next year. And I think that's why we're seeing what we're seeing right now in America, for example. They're trying to end civilization as we know it as quickly as possible. They're running out of time. And I think the beginning of this reset was the pandemic we had in 2020.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one thing about your book, that when you talk about the pandemic, obviously we had a lockdown and stuff. I'm of a different opinion. Like, I don't believe there was a pandemic as such.
No.
It's a plandemic, if you want to call it that,
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So there's a few points you brought up there, but just for people who are maybe new to this topic and they're maybe wondering, what the hell we're on about, what would you call? Because we're kind of told the story of man evolving, and then everything's improved, and we're at the pinnacle of invention in society, and nothing's ever been better. But all these buildings are everywhere that are just absolutely majestic, geometrically shaped, harmony, resonance. And how did we build them back then? And we're not building buildings like that now. And kind of what is the Tartarian Empire? What is that? How would you describe that?
Well, first of all, the to answer one question that you just raised, which I think is a really important one. Why don't we build like that now? And for me personally, because like I said in the book, and if you ever sort of see any of the posts that I put up, when I post on the group page, I always ask the same question that I pose in the book, and that is, this is just what I think. What do you think? So this is opinion, but I believe that there are two reasons why they don't build like they used to. One is because that was a different civilization, and that civilization clearly had people that were a lot larger than us, and that would suggest why the windows are a lot higher up and the doors are so big. There is no other logical explanation to build a manor house or a mansion, or even what we would call now a town hall or something that's that size at a time when heating, so we are told, was just basically logs on a fire. So how would you justify having such high ceilings in a building that would make it impossible to keep warm during the winter? So I think it was a different civilization that built them.
Just briefly, that's assuming there is winters, because maybe we had a different biosphere there, where basically the more temperate temperature and maybe humidity in the air, more oxygen in the air would lead to
more oxygen. I'm glad
you
you said that. I think that's why people, and some images I've seen, and you can Google this, Google Images or whatever search engine you use, and see that produce, trees and fruit and vegetables were a lot larger, and a lot of people say there was a higher oxygen content in the atmosphere, and that's why any living matter was larger. So I totally agree with that. So yes, did they have winters? They might not have done. Also, as a side issue, if you look at a lot of the old pictures out there of let's take, for example, if you wanted to look at one of the world's fairs towards the late 1800s, you'd also struggle to find any images of children.
Yeah, I noticed that.
It's weird, isn't it?
Pictures before, but it was actually you that brought that to my attention, and I was like, "Yeah, that is a strange one."
Where are the kids?
Yeah, I thought you were going to mention the fact that there's got these kind of fireplaces that don't really have a proper chimney or whatever, so there's no plumbing.
Yes.
Kind of aspect to it.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to talk about those. But to answer your question with the buildings, I think, first of all, it was a different civilization that built them, and that they understood cymatics and how building on ley lines was important, how to harness energy. They work with frequency as well. So just being inside the building, if it's constructed in the correct way, then the frequency that it naturally emits between the walls that it vibrates at, because obviously everything has a frequency and vibrates, just being inside one of those could create a sense of well-being, and also it would promote health, especially with your organs. But I also think that there's another reason that they don't build to that extent, and I think that's so what we build now, or certainly what they've built over the last couple of 100 years, can come down a lot easier.
No.
I mean, if you looked at the City of London, the Shard, Canary Wharf, the Gherkin, they'll come down so much easier than, say, St Paul's Cathedral would.
Yeah, well,
so I think that's
possibly they have these resets that, we say that they're creating them, but it might be a natural phenomenon that they know is going to happen every so often. And in the last one, everything gets destroyed apart from these buildings because they're so solidly built. And then they come along and found them, founded. And basically, then when everything gets wiped out again, what's the point of building like that? Because unless you go to that extent, or maybe they don't have the technology to do so, when the next reset happens, then everything's going to come down. And got the plans to go underground. I think during the pandemic, so-called, there were lots of trucks and stuff heading to the tunnels. Probably lots of supplies going down there. So that's why they're gradually shutting down the world, because they know there's shit about to happen.
Yeah.
And we'll be left on the surface going, what's going on? And they'll be all sealed up underground for 40 years. Well, we kind of go back to Stone Age times or Apocalypse Now, where, Armageddon type ground level, and then we'll have to build society back up, and they'll come along with their technology and maybe start the repopulation thing again or whatever. As long as
I sort of wonder with that, because if they wipe out most of the population like they did last time, that will they have to repopulate to the extent because they've got AI?
Yeah.
Now we don't know. They might have had that before, but certainly from where I see it, that they're not very far away from being able to replace an awful lot of the jobs that we do with AI. So you could repopulate to a much lesser extent and still have an infrastructure up and running with AI doing everything. And of course, unless it turns into Skynet and we have a Terminator type scenario going on, the AI is always going to be able to be switched off, reprogrammed and controlled. It's always going to be subservient. So in theory, if they do cull the population again and wipe us out, which it certainly looks like that's where we're headed, they won't have to worry about repopulating as dramatically as they did last time.
Well, they did talk in the Georgia Guidestones before they were knocked down about 500 million, I think was the number that they're kind of looking for to sustain what they need. It's basically, we're just going to work to build them the Rolls Royces or whatever, and then to parasite off our sweat equity. If you've got machines and everything doing that, then, what need do they have for us? And basically, some people claim with this vaccines or whatever, maybe nanobots forming inside us will be more mind controlled via the 5G powers or whatever. So we'll literally be walking robots, which could well be what the clones are anyway. If you talk about cloning, do they have, some people call them NPCs, where we don't have a voice in their head. So they're literally just a walking program of the Matrix of what the narrative is telling them. And AI is just the next level of that, to possibly, well, Elon Musk talks about, what is it, Skynet and something else, I think, to basically get us all hooked into the...
Yeah, his Neuralink thing,
Yeah. So
where
anyway,
are you with Elon Musk? What are your thoughts on
I don't
him?
think it's as genius that he's made out to be. I'm not even sure he's controlling his own Twitter account. I think he's definitely been, possibly with Nikola Tesla, as you say, it's another guy who's put there to provide a narrative. He, first of all, if Twitter was controlled and he gave out the Twitter, evidence that it was controlled operation, and then he was almost forced to buy it, so the story goes. And all of a sudden he turns into Mr. Free Speech. Twitter's a big data collecting agency, and it's getting us all arguing and negative vibes and everything going on in that realm. And, they can pick out all the conspiracy theorists or whatever if they want to shut them down further down the line or whatever. And now he's all of a sudden said he wasn't going to be political now. Oh, I'm political now. And he's jumping in and causing... But some of the things he says has obviously got legitimacy, but one man shouldn't have that much power. And, other voices who, probably yourself or, get shut down. And we don't get high in the Twitter feed. They're controlling who comes to the top, who can be seen, and what the narrative is. Again, so he's now getting involved in British politics, and Keir Starmer's coming out and just because of a tweet by Elon Musk. So I think he's just a figurehead, and he's probably could even be MK Ultra'd, some people say. And, I don't think he is this genius behind and the whole Tesla and outer space thing. I don't believe in outer space and SpaceX. I think that's all bullshit. So it's part of NASA's not a real thing. It's just $40 billion a day is going into it, but going down the tunnels, they're building infrastructure down there with that money, and they've got to do the wee videos now and again to pretend that it's real. So Elon Musk I find it crazy how so many of these so-called truthers get behind Musk or Trump or any of these given to us leaders, Jordan Peterson or Joe Rogan, who to me are quite obviously playing the game. They're
Rogan, yeah.
they're controlled opposition.
I think Rogan. I don't know before this, but I do remember during the pandemic that he was speaking out. He was quite outspoken about what was going on with the pandemic and the apparent virus, and started saying that there are other ways to cure this. If it is a virus, you can cure it with this, that, and the other. And that I think his daughters were approached by somebody or some men in black at school and told that your dad needs to stop what he's talking about and he needs to publicly retract what he said, or daddy's going to have an accident. And then he did go on and do that. So I think from that moment on, maybe that's a false flag, but from that moment on, we now have a Joe Rogan who I've watched him try and disprove Tartaria. And so this is the wackiest conspiracy theory I've ever heard of. Have you heard about this? And I thought, well, what you're doing now is you're in a position where you can guide people to look, almost distraction, to look at certain conspiracies that may or may not even exist. And so we're so distracted that we're not looking at anything. And I had an interview with James Delingpole, the journalist, about a week or so ago, and he said that he wasn't convinced about Tartaria. And when I turned around and said to him, well, that's what Joe Rogan said, he said that's the biggest thing you've said to convince me it is a thing, is the fact that Joe Rogan is saying it isn't, because that man is a shill.
Yeah.
He's clearly been got at.
He famously said before that he didn't believe in the moon landings, and then he's changed his opinion on that. So that to me is a big, huge red herring. And yeah, we're saying that ivermectin and hydrochloroquine could clear up a virus, but it's a bit like Robert Jr. Kennedy, whatever his name is, Robert Kennedy Jr. He talks about getting the right information, and the COVID vaccine was bad, but basically I don't believe in a virus at all. I think there's no need for any vaccines. So they play this game whereby they're justifying that there is viruses, but you can maybe clear it up with this or clear it up with that. But it's still within the ballpark of Big Pharma is helping us out. Just some vaccines are better than others or whatever. Instead of coming out saying, there's no evidence for a virus, period, which if people don't go that far, to me, they're controlled up,
Absolutely. And just look at the some people have said to me, well, you're an anti-vaxxer. And I used to say, no, I'm not. I just don't believe that the vaccine that was introduced for the COVID pandemic was to cure COVID. I mean, the fact that you need a booster would suggest that it wasn't effective if it was a real thing to start with. But for me, you can trace it all the way back to smallpox. We didn't have a polio issue until the smallpox vaccine was introduced. And then all of a sudden, from smallpox, people are being born with polio. Then the polio vaccine's introduced, and then we start having the number of people born autistic or with some form of autism skyrockets. And I think it was either Cambodia or Vietnam where they started the polio vaccine there as well. And they went from 0 cases of autism to 500,000 within the first year of the trials. So it's told me everything that I need to know, that there doesn't appear to be a vaccine out there that's been put into mass production for the benefit of mankind. It seems to be for the detriment, and to keep us constantly either to act as some sort of slow kill, to perhaps slow us down, make us different, kill us off. But certainly that there's nothing there that has been done to promote good health or well-being. There's a different agenda with these things.
Well, basically, again, if you look into it, there's no evidence of an isolated virus. There's no evidence of contagion ever being proven. So therefore, it stands to fact after that, every vaccine isn't doing what they're claiming it's doing. So it's not really a vaccine. It's just a myth, that whole thing. There was a milkmaid that done the thing and she never got ill. Again, whatreallymakesyouill.com is a good website. I've interviewed the authors of that book, Don Lester, David Parker, and they go into the various stories and the various things like the polio, people were getting sprayed with DTT, whatever it was back then. And all these illnesses are actually just different symptoms of toxic poisoning. And we give them names, but that's basically what it is. It's the body trying to heal itself from some kind of toxic poisoning due to the terrain, not theory, the terrain model of, you're responsible for your own health, albeit there might be spraying stuff on us that we're breathing in that's making us ill. But ultimately, you're not going to inject something into you that's going to provide an imaginary level of protection from this imaginary thing that's coming through the air that you can't see. That's another thing that gets us to believe in things we can't see. And, it's a bogeyman, like, oh, you've caught a virus. Oh, no. But, like, where is this virus, and there's so many things that just exist in the imagination that are not actually based in the real world that just get people just through the power of belief, and that's got the word lie in the middle of it, So
there's an interesting interview Joe Rogan did with Mel Gibson, and I think it might be quite recent. Somebody sent me a link to it, and in fact, no, it was my eldest son, Tom. He sent me a link to it last night. He lives out in Canada, so I guess it was the morning for him, but for me it was the evening. And it was Mel Gibson. It looks recent. I don't watch Joe Rogan, so
I've not seen it, but it's quite recent. Yeah,
he's talking about 3 of his friends that were diagnosed with they were terminal, and they started taking certain products that were connected to possible cures for COVID, and that they've all been given the all clear.
All right.
They all took the same products, and they've been given the all clear. And I thought that was fascinating, because they were the same products that Rogan was talking about, during the pandemic. So
these things just are more toxic things in the body. It's keeping that narrative going. That first of all, COVID was real, and second of all, you can take something for it. But the big secret is actually fasting and just resting. The body is healing itself, and if you let that run its course, like even cancer is just the body storing up toxins that have not had the chance to get expelled because you're probably putting more toxicity into it. So I think the body knows what it's doing a lot of the time, and you can aid it resting and maybe fresh orange juice and clean water, and but ultimately that's what's happening when you get these symptoms. But we go to the doctor, first thing he does is give you a drug which gives more toxicity back into the body, or you rub cream in it which suppress the expression of the stuff coming out, and you're managing the symptom, which again, all these pharmaceutical guys, they're all getting together or whatever in the golf club and saying, you do this and I'll do that and I'll make a profit for this, and so it's product and commerce by keeping us ill and like cattle in the field, we've just treated as the, what do you call it, there's a word they use for just stupid people, basically the dumbed down sheeple phrase, but because they go to the Freemasonry or whatever, they become illuminated with knowledge. So we're kind of, our ignorance is kind of used against us, and that word ignorance has got ignore in it, because a lot of people don't spend the time to actually investigate. They went and took the jab without researching anything, they're just blind belief in authority.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of almost waking humanity up. A lot of people woke up due to that pandemic because they realised something fishy. So they were the ones that maybe took a step back, and since then, these people have kind of got together to support each other now, and that's kind of a good thing. But the majority are still watching the news, still believing in television, still going along with the narrative, and that's, even the things like the law. If we understand how legalese and what they call the law is just another way to control us, because again, it's just them who's creating these laws. Who are they to decide? Who's got the authority over one man over another? Just because he's wearing a costume and with a funny hat, and he turns up at your front door, and all of a sudden you're subservient to these people. If we understood the law, we could be our own sovereign, entity.
Absolutely, and that's it, though, isn't it? With them, for example, that the idea is that it's fear. The first thing we do when we see the blue light come on, if we're driving, or there's a knock at the door and we see the high vis and the word police, that it's the fear that it instills. But ultimately, who are these people? And we know now, I mean, there's certainly the people that are awake know that they are a private corporation.
Yep.
That they do not serve the public. And if they do serve the public as they claim to, well, then they're a public servant and they're there to do what I need doing. They're certainly not there to try and help the TV license man gain access to the property, or the local energy, an energy supplier gain access to fit a smart meter. They should have absolutely no presence during a civil matter.
Yep.
But we've just got this fear, and they are being. I see it quite a lot now. They're being picked up. They're being called out when they're interfering or almost assisting a private organisation to gain some sort of either access to your property or to gain property that you own through repossession or a judgment from court. And look at the county court itself and what the councils are doing when they do the bulk hearing for people that refuse to pay the council tax, where the council is issuing the paperwork and not the court. And so it's all an absolute joke. And I think more people are, like you said, that they're realizing that they are sovereign and that actually that they are the highest authority and that they answer to no one other than God. And if that's the idea with the judges, the king, and the politicians, that ultimately they answer only to God, then my question would be that in a court where I'm asked to swear on a Bible in which it states only God can judge me, what the hell is that person with the wig and the black dress on doing?
Yep. Well, first of all, he's wearing black because he's in front of the dead.
Yeah, dead entity.
The legal fiction of the birth certificate. He's wearing a wig to hide his thoughts from God, and so it's okay. He's on a different plane. He's sitting higher than you, so he's not in the same plane. So anything you say, he can't hear. There's all kinds of tricks and traps of the court itself, and even talk about police, the constable or the officer. The constable can get involved when there's a crime and there's a victim. Then you would say, okay, you committed fraud, you've done harm to another being, you've murdered or raped somebody. Yeah, there should be some kind of probably force or even the local community coming together to make that person have a punishment of some description. But again, if there's no victim, then they're just using paperwork in this statutes, which are an act. So it's all part of the theatre show.
Yeah, it is.
And it's all to do with perception and manipulation of language. If they give you a summons, you summon the dead, and that's just an invitation to their place of business when you look at the Black's Law Dictionary, because they're using different dictionaries.
That's the key, isn't it? If we all took a bit of time out, perhaps once a week, an hour out of our time, to stop doom scrolling on social media or watching the bloody news or putting a soap opera on, to just numb ourselves, and read a little bit of Black's, that probably would do people the world of good to realise the power they have. And I think with the police in particular, the key there is, of course, I totally agree that if someone's committed a crime where there is a victim, where something has been done to another person or people, then you should answer for that. But when it's a victimless crime, and perhaps, like, for example, let's look at a motoring offence. Who is it that you've actually offended? And I would argue that the problem starts when you allow the person in the fancy dress costume to assume authority over you, and that is done from the moment they ask you if you understand. And what they're asking by that is, from Black's Law, that is, will you stand under me? Because I am above you. I am the authority here. And so the key thing there is to only ever reply to everything they say with, I do not understand.
Yeah.
And you just keep repeating that. You're under no obligation to even speak to them. But I think, if you're doing something that they perceive as being wrong and they call you over and you go to them, you've immediately relinquished your sovereign power. You're obeying somebody else's command, and I think that's where the problem starts. And that these people, I think there are a lot of police out there that do a great job, and a lot of them join for the right reasons, but the system itself isn't what we are led to believe. It is there really to ultimately control us, and it's a revenue generator. And it puts us in constant fear all the time. Most of us, if we saw a police car behind us with the blue lights come on, won't think that they're about to shoot past us and they're going to an incident. We'll think that we've done something wrong, even though we know deep down that we haven't done anything wrong. The car's legal, we're fine, we've not been drinking or anything, but just for that split second until it overtakes us, we think we've done something wrong, and that is exactly where they want us. And that's
we've lost them there. Hopefully he'll come back just shortly. Hope you're enjoying the show so far. Don't know if you pushed a button there. If you've got any questions, and we're supposed to be talking about the book, but we went on a bit of a tangent, which you can do on these topics. So we'll just wait for him to hopefully log back in. Maybe his iPhone's died. He was talking about having power to it earlier. And we shall wait and see. So, la-di-da. Basically, I've got his book here. Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Dolls, and it's got the different topics. The elite, well, first of all, has history been rewritten? Then we've got the elite, or what he calls the parasitic race. Then the Tartarian Empire. Then he talks about the cathedrals, churches, and star forts. And then lost Tartarian technology. Here he comes back. What happened there? Hold on. There we go. Oh, your audios went back to before he came on. The audio wasn't so good.
Is the audio okay now? Or?
No, it's still quiet.
But now.
That's it now, yep. Okay.
Sometimes I wonder if it's. I don't need these because I just unplugged my microphone. Sometimes, and I've had this before on Facebook, when I've said certain things, I've been cut off.
Yep, I've had that quite a few times with certain guests. You seem to be getting into a hot topic or a hot area, and then all of a sudden it goes dink.
yeah, and I had that. I did a live Q&A session on Facebook a while back, and every time I mentioned certain things, it would say that the signal was weak, too weak to continue, and people were getting bored and just dropping off. But I was sat next to the bloody router, full signal strength. So I guess that every now and again we're punished, aren't we?
Yeah, just mean they're letting us know we're getting watched, but past kidding at this point.
Yeah, me too. Because if we don't stand up now, then it was all for nothing.
Yeah, but I mean, they do make it difficult because I had a Facebook group, had 7,500 people in it, and basically it got hacked. I've been onto Facebook and let them know it got hacked, but they're happy for the hacker to still have the account and not give it back to me. Yeah. And then I got this message coming up on my page just after I could see it, just like it was the Illuminati inviting me to join them or something like that. Just this very strange message. And then I got 10,500 videos wiped off of Vimeo, so I had to go over my whole website and upload that. That's still an ongoing job. YouTube deball you and strike you left, right, and centre, and you don't get seen on Twitter, whereas I say other people do, and you just can get despondent. And but basically, what else are you going to do? I find it quite interesting to talk to people like yourself that are doing some interesting things, and I want to share them with people. So you just do what you can, and then when you die, I always say you do what you can. When you die, you can look back saying, well, you tried your best, you know.
Have you heard of Matt Deegan?
Yeah.
So about 4 years ago, I contacted him, and he was the person that got me into the whole Tartaria conspiracy. And I said to him that I've been discussing this with people, and they all think I'm barking mad. I said the odd person listens, but I am struggling to find anybody else out there that knows what I'm talking about or has even heard of it. And he said to me, in the end, if you just wake one person up, then you might have just saved a life.
Yeah, I mean, I do get a few comments like that, quite touching.
I thought that keeps you motivated.
Well, I came out at the start of the Convid because I found this Don Lester, David Parker, who just brought out a book just before Convid started, saying about no virus. So I was going balls to the wall, and a lot of time, just this is even before they started the vaccines. So I think I did help a lot of people avoid that, which I've had some feedback over that, and it's quite touching when people tell you you've had that influence. You know, as you say, even just one person. So I guess that's why we do it ultimately.
Yeah, I've seen several people that have been friends for a long time, and actually my own cousin become seriously ill, terminally ill.
Yeah, me too.
That were absolutely fine before they had the medical intervention. I think within the first, by the end of 2022, I had lost my cousin and 3 close friends. One was at one point terminally ill, and another one is currently terminal. Yeah. And I'm not saying that people don't get ill and that people contract cancer at any time, but to have 5 people I was particularly close to all be diagnosed with cancer within, well, my cousin was a brain tumour, all within a few months of each other. Well, I'd not seen anything like that before. I'd lost relatives and friends over the years, but not so many so quickly. And they all shared one thing in common. They were all up to date with their boosters.
Yep, it's 100%. I mean, there's actual statistics out there to prove. I mean, they try and smudge it, you know, in various ways, but there's no doubt about it. There's so many people got ill and vaccine injured, and, you know, Christ knows what could be down the line. They could have metals in their blood and could turn up these 5G towers at any point, and maybe moral collapse, you know. And, you know.
Do you think that 5G is causing what people believe is long COVID?
Well, I certainly think, EMFs disrupt their field and, you know, can make you ill. So if you live near these towers or whatever, I mean, long COVID is obviously bullshit, so there's something else.
Yeah.
And basically that would be a reason why people would get ill.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even use a microwave, you know, anymore, you know. And basically these waves that we're all, again, living in a soup, even the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And is not good for us, you know. I've actually got a speaker I was using as well, and I was walking around with it just attached to like this bag I had on, and at the end of the day I was feeling not very good, so it just says, you know, I'm not going to use it anymore just because I'm feeling there's something going on with it, you know.
Yeah.
So there's Bluetooth, everyone's on Bluetooth these days, and you just wonder what that's doing as well. Then they're talking about 6G and 7G, so Christ knows what that'll do.
Yeah.
So what do you think about? Sorry, I was going to ask about Tartaria itself. What good would it do people to know about Tartaria?
I think the first of all, for me, the thing with Tartaria isn't that I find them the most interesting civilization of them all, and from what I've read and what I am constantly sent information on, it appears that they are a civilization that was using what we would call Atlantean technology, that the ability to harness energy from the ether. And I think that people now are slowly coming to terms with that's what the pyramids did, or certainly one of the main functions, that these were power stations supplying power. And that the Tartarians were masters of harnessing that same energy and perfected it to a point where they were building centers of healing that we would call cathedrals that stored energy. Obviously, you know, cathedral, cathode, row. That these places were where you went to regularly to balance your internal organs, and they used pipe organ music, and the chakras. Your chakras were balanced, and that was represented by the crystal windows that have obviously over the years been replaced by stained glass, and the organs and the bells have been detuned or replaced, and they've now become places of worship where that wasn't their original intention. And the fascinating thing with Tartaria is that if you want proof that they built these incredible buildings and that something happened, most people can find that in their local town or city just by looking for a building that has windows half buried in the pavement. They're often dismissed as being servants' quarters. Well, it just let a bit of natural sunlight into the servants' quarters. There is no logical or practical reason to build a cellar. They're notoriously damp. There is no light. Anything you put in there is going to probably have problems with rot, mold, damp. So they don't serve any purpose. And of course, why would you not build another story up? Why would you go into the ground? And also, why would you have half of a window exposed? These aren't necessarily small windows put in place. These are large windows. It's just at least half of it is covered by mud and rock when you actually go into the building and see what's the other side. So the backstory's weak, to say the least. So it's a nice one for people to look into, because everybody can find one of these buildings near where they live. And the next thing is to look at the rooftop. And sometimes they'll have the most ornate metalwork, which is how they were picking up the energy. And this is something that Tesla worked on for a very long time, or at least the person we're told was Tesla, which I believe was perhaps a group of people, or a series of technological advancements that they wanted to label one person with to give it some sort of narrative or backstory, rather than say, look, we've finally managed to reverse engineer the technology the previous civilization were using, and we're going to hijack a few of them because we've now had we've now got a way of actually charging people for energy. So the backstory with Tartaria is interesting, and that's what fascinates me with it. That they appear to be, in some respects, not as advanced as us. I mean, I don't believe for one moment they could have a conversation like we are now, and with this sort of technology. But when it comes to enlightenment, well-being, working in harmony with the planet and nature and each other, and keeping our vibration high, they were so far beyond where we are. They were all awake, if you like. Every single one of them was awake. We're here, we're only slowly starting to talk about our frequency and our connection with the universe or the ether, and understanding the importance of different frequencies and the music we listen to, and that we all vibrate. Yet despite that, for years we've been going around saying, oh, I really didn't like the vibe of that person, or there's a bit of negativity in the room, or he's a really positive guy. We've been talking the talk, but we haven't been walking it.
Yeah.
But that I think that is inbuilt into us, that we do understand all of this. It's just taking some people, perhaps the majority of people, a little bit longer to wake up than the rest of us.
Just when you're talking there, I just thought of the connection there with Elon Musk, and he's got Tesla cars. And then obviously with Tesla, it was Donald Trump's uncle, I think, who apparently took all his writings and stuff like that. And again, if he just took them and disappeared with them, why isn't humanity getting access to this knowledge? Just because this one guy stole them. And again, it's a good way for people to say, oh, Tesla was working on that, but it's gone now, so we can't have it. So therefore, oil, and now even the whole idea with electric cars taking over from oil, to me, is a misnomer, because we'll never get the same amount of cars as you can with oil, because just the way that it takes to make these batteries and, all the rest of it, it's just again, it could be a way for them to start shutting down the world, to say, oh, the cars need to go electric, or just leave us stranded in these 15-minute cities or whatever while they go down and we're all trying to get out the gates, locked in. So just some interesting connections there with Tesla and Trump and Elon Musk. It's just maybe just part of the show again. And again, they're controlling narratives with that. What about giants, though? Do you think, and we talked about the size of the buildings, and where did we come from And was the Tartarian Empire a whole race of giants kicking around? And were we living at the same time, smaller people, modern day human compared to them? Were they intermingled? Did we look up to them as the gods? Maybe Zeus and all these people that we talk about, maybe they lived longer and had different abilities than us. Have you got any thoughts on that?
If you look at the size of people, if you got back, sorry, a little bit of, I've sort of got a little bit of feedback coming through. I'm just going to try this again. Sorry,
Okay.
Billy.
No worries.
But I can hear myself.
It's okay this end, but we can't hear you. All right.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was getting a little bit of feedback. If you look at, and I would recommend, although I did put a post up on this a week or two ago about the height of people from Moses and Noah to Gilgamesh, the height that we were, and this is something that you can Google. What height was Gilgamesh? What height was Moses? What height was Noah? And they were all giants compared to us, 12 to 15 feet tall, maybe even taller than that. I don't think that they were the only people. I think that we lived with them, and I believe that they were a huge part of the previous civilization that needed to be removed, because along with that, you can then classify giants as mythology. But the story of giants goes back right to the very beginning. And I am a believer that the Anunnaki, which actually just refers to people that came from the sky, not actually really a race of people, but I believe that we were engineered, and the Epic of Gilgamesh, it does state that these people were twice our height, and they refer to the hominids that were wandering around, that we would call Neanderthal man, was half the size of them. So I think that what we're looking at, these giants may well be very loosely descendants from Nephilim and Anunnaki, and that was a backstory they needed to have removed. But what they haven't done is been able to address the fact that in lots of ancient scripts and even the Bible, that these key figures were giant compared to us. But I think that they're not. Some people say, well, the Tartarians just a race of giants, and I don't believe so. I think there were people our size as well, more so. But I think that they lived in harmony with each other, and the buildings had to cater for them. And also, it would be a lot easier if you've got a team of people working on a building. Somebody who's 12 to 15 feet high is going to be able to do certain things that you can't, and obviously have a lot more strength. And some people will say, well, we couldn't have been that high because the human skeleton wouldn't support that; it would collapse. And you think, well, that's absolute bollocks, because there are photographs of people that and look at some basketball players. That are clocking on for 7 feet high. But why would so many people refer to stories of giants? We've had it instilled since childhood, Jack and the Beanstalk and the story of David and Goliath. And what I've started to think is that mythology isn't mythology at all, that certain things have been classed as myth because that's what they want us to believe, and that pretty much everything's inverted. I also, as a side issue, think that when they dig up a dinosaur, that actually what they're finding is what we call a mythological creature, and that they're not dinosaurs at all. So to answer your question, giants walked amongst us, but I don't think they were anywhere near to the same level of the population as we are, what we would call us normal people. But I think once upon a time, it would have been, as recently as a few hundred years ago, it would be very, very common to have giants walking with you, working with you, and it wasn't anything unusual.
I don't know if it's AI these days. It's hard to know what pictures to trust on the internet, but I've seen quite a few pictures of what you would call a giant, and really big people in various parts of the world, and it does look legit, some of these pictures. And again, you just wonder, where they killed off, maybe the early part of the 20th century,
I think so.
and basically not allowed to hang around for the narratives to get solidified.
But I agree. I think that they needed to be removed, and then there may well be somewhere where there's still giants walking around, because there are a lot of places we're not allowed to go, and I don't just mean Antarctica. There are islands we're not allowed to go to. There's one called Snake Island, where we're told, I think it's off the coast of America somewhere, that we're told we're not allowed to go to because of the vast number of venomous snakes.
Right.
Well, if we're not allowed to access that island, then we're never going to find out if there's snakes on it or not. We just can't go there. So there could be anything.
I just think there are islands that we don't get access to. But I heard a story. There's some Iraqi soldiers. They discovered this big giant with red hair.
Red hair.
Aye. That seems to be a common one.
It does, doesn't it? And what they're describing, it sounds Celtic.
Yeah.
And you could trace that back to Noah's grandchildren. You've got Magog, and is it Japhir? And one started they say that Magog was the first person to be a Tartarian. He was the beginning of that, and that his name escapes me, Japhir, or that he was the first Celt, and these were both 12 to 15 feet tall, and there is no reason to believe that they would have completely died out. I think I think it's genocide. Frankly, they need to get rid of any backstory that doesn't work with their new version of history, and it is funny, isn't it? Because Gilgamesh, Genghis Khan, incidentally, and certainly in some religions, and I believe that European Jews, which my mum's father was, they believe that Jesus had red hair. So a lot of people do refer to, these red-haired, taller beings wandering around, and it is always red hair. And I found that fascinating, because a few of the soldiers actually talked about what they'd seen, and then there was footage of helicopters removing this huge body. Okay. I did see that. I don't know if it's still around.
I think Michael Tarzarian talks about the Irish origins of civilization as well, and again, the Irish race seems to be quite targeted. I think they're kind of like childlike dreamers kind of element that kind of lost in society as well, very left-brained. But I think we miss that kind of, childlike play in a lot of ways. It's kind of, even the attack on comedy these days is, you can't laugh at anything without somebody being offended.
No, you can't, and I still do, and I struggle with the whole concept of being woke, and I'm quite happy to be shot down for it. But I firmly believe that first of all, what you do with your body and what you decide you are is entirely up to you, and it's really, frankly, none of my business. All I do know is 1,000 years from now, when someone digs up my skeleton and those around me, they're going to find male and female. Yeah. They're not going to find anything in between. And also with this weird situation we've got going on with certain people and children referring to themselves as a furry, as an animal. Right. Well, if you identify yourself as an animal, haven't you surely just lost your human rights and the right of that particular, if it's a child, to attend school, because animals aren't allowed to attend school? So haven't they just shot themselves in the foot? Or by carrying on attending school, for example, are the children's parents being hypocritical because they're contradicting themselves? This child wants to identify as an animal and should be allowed, but we still want them to attend school as a child would. Well, no, they need to live in a cage and crap in a tray.
I think that's what some school teachers are making the kids do when they claim they're a cat.
I think if my children grown up, but if I was to do it all again with everything I know now, they would never have gone to school.
I was just going to say that, the old indoctrination centre,
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely ridiculous. One size does not fit all. You can't have a room with 30 children that are all at different levels with different thought processes and teach them all the same stuff. You've got to find out, well, first of all, you need to give them the truth.
Yeah.
And secondly, you've got to find out where their passion lies and develop that passion, not force feed them crap. And I just don't agree with it. I think it's an absolute joke. And of course, what they're teaching now, children in primary school being taught about masturbation and things like that. The person that decided that should took place, I think that they need to meet their maker sooner rather than later.
Yep, we've got anal sex and stuff like that in these books. It's like, what the hell is going
Yeah.
on?
Yeah, the people responsible for that. There's not. I hope that one day they'll pay for what they've
Again,
done.
maybe these are things for us to kind of eventually say, hold on a minute, we're not playing their game anymore. And
Yeah.
we're all invested in this system. And it's like we can't survive without the system. But that's maybe where we're going lost, because the whole fiat currency world, it's all imaginary. It's not based in reality. If we all started growing, and you grow tomatoes, you grow cucumbers, we'll share our food. A lot of feminism was created, so women could go to work and be a slave just like the man.
Yeah.
Instead of the women were keeping the society quite well knit when looking after each other's children while the men went to work, and then a new year, everyone knew the neighbours. But now, you send your children off to get indoctrinated and both parents are working and we're still skint at the end of it. And it's just, it seems to be the rich and their wee designs and mechanism is making us poorer and poorer, and everyone just keeps their head down and keeps going along with it. Don't want to be the nail that stands up, so nothing ever changes. But it's got to come to a point. Maybe it's going to take some kind of end time type scenario when they go down the tunnels and we're saying, oh shit, we should have got together 20 years ago to organise ourselves, and now shit's out the fan.
And it's funny, isn't it? If you look at the Industrial Revolution, or if you look at the Victorian workhouses, what has really changed between a workhouse and a modern office block? They might not be sat at a production line, if you like, but they are still sat in rows. And just as a little reminder that they are a slave, of course, most of them are wearing shirts and ties. Obviously and the cuffs, they're cuffed. They've got the neck collar on, and they've got they've got the leash. Yeah, and they think that they're a lot of these people are doing so well. I'm big in the city. No, you're not. You're not. You're still part of the problem. You're still a slave. It's just your salary is now so ridiculously high that you're able to borrow more and carry more debt, and never quite earn as much as you need to get out of that loop. But don't worry, by the time you retire, you'll have had a couple of heart attacks, and then ill health will finish you off through stress, through this amazing job that you had. And they don't realise that they are a debt slave. And sometimes I wonder if the people that have decided not to bother going to work, and perhaps generations of their family haven't either, their parents didn't and their children don't, and that they get a house and everything paid for, maybe they've got it right. They don't do anything at all and don't have to, and they have no stress. They don't have to worry about where their next paycheck's coming from, because they know that every month everything's covered and they've got a roof over their head, and they seem to be slightly out the loop. But I personally think, like you said, that we need to go back to basics. We need to trade and barter, and that what we should all do is find a way of perhaps getting communities or groups of people together to buy chunks of land, to declare the land sovereign, because we don't need planning permission. A local corporation has got no right to tell us what we can and can't build, and then actually create communities and perhaps what we would call sort of settlements or eco villages with like-minded people, and get back to basics before we all end up trapped in these 15-minute cities where we can't get out and we're monitored all the time. I never signed up to that.
Well, that's what universal credit and everything's all designed to do, and to get us, totally getting ready for that. And there was a guy who I followed, somebody Kenny, somebody. He was with Santos Bonacci doing a few chats a few years ago, but he did go to Portugal and he did set up his own community there.
That's interesting. Why he picked Portugal? I'd like to know a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think it was easier for him to do that kind of thing there.
That's where I'm going.
All right, okay.
Yeah, that's all the research has led me.
Yeah.
There, so my wife and I are planning to do that. But I'd be fascinated to know what.
Yeah, I've got his name. Someone's telling me Michael Kenny, but I don't think that's right. So yeah, he's got this something project there. Can't remember the name, Phoenix Project or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but I'll remember it because he had quite an interesting idea of cosmology, and like he says, there was like the Antarctic wall were in kind of one toroidal field, and the sun and moon are inside that one, and then there's a bigger one, Mars and Saturn or whatever's in that one, and that's the sun and moon in that realm, and then there's a larger one, and basically every so often these toroidal fields will fall, and the people can go to the different islands and stuff.
Yeah.
At that time. It was quite an interesting model. I certainly don't believe we're in a spinning ball, you know.
No. I think that one's. Is it the? I can't remember the name of it. I always get confused with this, but I'm at a point now in my life where I have to write everything down. I carry a notepad with me, and I sometimes, totally honest, I sometimes wonder if I've got some sort of early dementia or something. I am really finding it hard to remember things, and I'm watching my mum. She's only 75, but I'm watching my mum go. Well, I've been watching her go through the same thing for a little while now, but my wife says to me, it's because you take in too much information that you can't fit it all in. So now I live in this world where if I haven't written it down, it never happened or existed. But there's something called, I think it's Halligan theory, where what the system does is it gives you two options. You either believe it's a flat earth or you believe it's a spinning ball, and that the truth is actually something entirely different.
You mean the Hegelian dialect?
Thank you. I've even written about it.
That's what whole politics, everything's set up. You know, you get left or right, but they're going to go down the middle.
Two cheeks of the same arse with Nigel Farage as the sphincter, as I like to call it. It doesn't matter who's in charge. You've got these people ranting about Keir Starmer. That man's a puppet. He couldn't choose what loo roll the House of.
I can't listen to him for more than 30 seconds without just, my skin crawling.
Oh, it's nonsense, isn't it? For me, he will always be the person that let Jimmy Savile get away with what he did. But obviously, literally, I think 2 months before he became leader of the Labour Party, he's in Holland at the Bilderberg Group at the Bilderberg Hotel.
Why?
Being sworn in.
But he's openly admitted that he'd follow, I can't remember, the EU or whatever they are. Who is it?
Yeah, the World Economic Forum.
He follow them before Britain, so...
Absolutely. He'll do what he's told, or there'll be consequences. Davos. And he's openly admitted that. These people all, whether it's the president, I think Trump might be the exception, and perhaps Kennedy, but a lot of, as in JF, a lot of the world leaders, it all takes place at the Bilderberg Hotel each year when they interview the next possible candidate, providing they toe the line. And I see these brainwashed people or sheeple banging on about Keir Starmer without understanding that man has absolutely no say in anything. He is just the person that delivers the will of the people that control everything. And you think that by voting you're playing a part in or you're having a say in what happens. You are not. It makes no difference whether you attend and tick a box or not, or put a cross in a box. It makes no difference.
Electricity and energy, volt. You're giving your power to them. You're giving your power away. And an election, electricity. It's part of the theatre show. And just talking about world leaders, I just thought of Putin there. Again, when I see Putin these days, his wife said that he wasn't the same guy, and
yes,
you look at pictures of them, and some people say recently Alex Jones has been replaced and Donald Trump's been replaced, and
Alex Jones.
just to go into the aspect of cloning, because again you see some pictures of old photos and it looks like John Travolta was hanging back there and all this kind of stuff. What do you think of the Cabbage Patch babies? We're going to go into that in the the incubators, and do you think there was cloning back then?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you look at the population boom, we saw a massive increase in the number of people. But if you take for example just the number of people that Russia, which I believe was really where the Cabbage Patch babies started, where the cloning started, because for me Russia will always be the heart, if you like, of Tartaria, and where a lot of their architecture remains unharmed and intact. They lost literally with the civil wars and also the forced famine that they had. They lost over half the population. So if you look at the number of people that were around in the early 1800s, and let's just say that everybody that was physically able to had one child a year, you still wouldn't go from 1 billion to 8 billion in 150 years. It's just not logically possible. It's not feasible. So I think they needed to repopulate fast. And for the people that think that we couldn't possibly clone, obviously we know now that they can. And the 90s saw Dolly the sheep, but this is old technology that goes back really to the Anunnaki, who took the ape-like hominid and that was wandering around and used them to mine gold for them. And we were created as a slave race, and that's 150 to 250,000 years ago. And I believe that the descendants, which would have initially been the pharaohs and then so on, obviously Amun-Ra or Marduk said that he was leaving everything to his children, and he said the Ra childs, who we can work out quite simply who they are, that he left the power of the earth and everything in it to them. And why wouldn't he have left with them also the technology? Too, not just the wealth and the buildings, but and the people, but the technology. And I think that the experiments that they say that the Epic of Gilgamesh says, and a lot of early texts. This isn't just the Epic of Gilgamesh. This story and the story of, for example, Noah, the first great flood, where they try to wipe out humanity and start again. I mean, that's written in Native American history. It's written in Indian history, all across the world. Lots of different cultures share exactly the same story, the same timeline, the same people that appeared and did everything. But we saw a few of their early experiments create monsters like Gorgon, Cyclops, Banshees, two-headed giants. And they say that these were just released into the wilderness. And they kept going until they cracked us and, had the first boy born, Adamu, which just means first man. And then they needed to create a female version of him, which was Heva, which is where Eve comes from. And away we go. And that's Akkadian, Babylonian text that's written in. This isn't stuff that, someone's just plucked out of the ether and decided to build a conspiracy. This is thousands of years old, this story, and it's repeated everywhere. And the Egyptians said that obviously the Bible says that they mixed clay with the blood of God, and clay were mixed, and clay just meant at the time, clay just referred to living matter, or part of the earth. But the Egyptians say the same story, but they say that it was the tears of the gods, which of course would still contain the DNA regardless. It doesn't have to necessarily be blood. As we know from ancestry.com, we can send a saliva swab off and and away we go. So cloning, I think, goes back a very long time, and I do believe that that's really what we are a result of. cloning. For some of us, I think there may well be that the people that are awake, the people that question everything, maybe our DNA is slightly different. Maybe we're carrying information and history that goes back right to the very beginning, but that we're actually carrying that information of what happened before and what was in our DNA, and that the people that don't, no matter what you say to them, will not wake up, that they may well be the result of pure cloning, where both great grandparents, I think it's 5 generations, both grandparents were cloned, and they maybe don't carry that information, because we know we can store an awful lot of information within our DNA itself, and that water, if we are 70% water, that water can store an incredible amount of data. I think that's inbuilt in us, that we do know deep down that things aren't right, and that our past is different to what we've been told, and that I think that the awake amongst us maybe are more so because we carry a DNA that has that information in, and things just don't sit right with us.
When was the story of these Cabbage Patch dolls? I know they had the World Fairs at like the early 1900s.
Yeah.
Had the incubator babies, and they had the woman who done the movie, The Fairies in the Garden.
Oh, Alice Guy Blash. Yeah. She took her inspiration from it. Well, there is. It actually goes back a little bit further than that. I mean, the theory of the cabbage and the Cabbage Patch cloning goes back to, from what I've researched, this is Russian folklore. Now, that the narrative will say that actually the reason that we believe or told children that they came from cabbage patches is because we didn't understand ourselves until scientists discovered in 1865 how a child and how conception took place. Which is strange, isn't it? Because the first abortion was back in Egyptian times, so I find that quite hard to believe. But oddly enough, the cabbage isn't just. Some people say it represents a womb. In Russian folklore, it represents a womb. But there is one interesting thing with the cabbage, and it's particularly with red cabbage, that going back at least 200 or 300 years, it was used as a fertility test. What you did was you boiled red cabbage leaves, and the water mixed with the pregnant woman's urine would go one color or another. It would either be a sort of pinky red color, and that would suggest that you're having a boy, or if it went purple, you were having a girl.
Right.
Now that is 55% accurate even today.
Right,
So the whole cabbage thing, I think, is always had something to do with fertility. And cabbage itself also contains something that I've completely forgotten, that's abbreviated as DIM, D-I-I-M. I'll see if I've got some notes on it, actually, because I've been researching this quite recently. Right, so I'm glad I wrote this down. Dindolymethane. And dindolymethane is an antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and a detox promoter. And it's been known to actually protect the eggs and sperm and protect the fetus. And that comes from cabbage.
Interesting.
So the connection between cabbage and fertility actually is also scientific. Now, how they would have known this hundreds of years ago, I don't know, but the stories dating, date with cabbage and the association of cabbage with a baby date back to the 1600s. That's as far back as I can go. But there are also lots of references to cabbage and babies too. Incidentally, there's and this is another thing that people can Google. There's a statue outside a maternity hospital in Tomsk, in Russia, and the statue is called Im Anna, and it is a cabbage with a baby
Really?
inside. Yeah, and you can Google that. Now, there's not a lot of information on it, but there are a lot of images, and mainly it's on TripAdvisor.
Right.
The whole cabbage thing is bizarre because it goes across the world. In Holland, there's a saying which is growing like a cabbage, and
Right.
that's if a child is growing quickly,
Right.
and then they'll actually say in Dutch that your child's growing like a cabbage.
Right.
And in France, it's a term of endearment. To refer to someone as their little cabbage
Right.
is an actual term of endearment.
So
So
in English, it's kind of a
Mon
negative
petit
thing.
chou.
In English, it could be a negative thing. It's like when he's turned into a cabbage.
Yes, it's strange, that isn't it? And yeah, you're quite right. But it's Scottish, of course. Like it's Scottish mythology that what children would do is they'd leave cabbage leaves on the doorstep of their house for the fairies if they wanted a new sibling. So there's always been this connection between the cabbage, and they say it's because it looks something like a woman's womb, and there are layers to it, which I can't quite get my head round. But the postcards that came out became what we call reproduction postcards. Some call them Cabbage Patch postcards, or Meadow Baby postcards, Babylon Baby postcards.
Crazy them when you look at them. There's so many of them. Why were these all produced?
Yeah. Well, they reckon that the first ones that really became popular were actually designed by three sisters from New Zealand. They were published by a company called Rex and became widespread. They started in Russia, then became popular across Europe. But actually, the writing on a lot of these was translated into 16 different languages. So they were popular worldwide, but ultimately they became really popular in America. And there are some images out there of these postcards where people have actually uploaded into the net the reverse of the card, so you can see the message. And there's one quite interesting one where that's in circulation that actually has, I think it's a lady called Aggie writing to a friend she refers to as L, just the letter L, and says something along the lines of aren't these beautiful on the other side of this postcard? Aren't these beautiful, these babies beautiful? Hurry before they're all sold out.
Right. Wow.
And they were actively selling babies. Where did they all come from? Now, a lot of people say, well, there've been a lot of civil wars, there was a lot of famine, a lot of poverty. Okay. But how come all these babies were the same age? We're not looking at children. We're not looking at postcards and a conspiracy, if you like, where there are children of all ages. That would be something that I would refer to as the orphan trains that happened later on. But literally from the 1800s, we have a sudden influx of babies, newborn babies, and postcards saying that translate to babies for sale, baby farm, baby shop, baby lottery. That's very different. That's very different to children. We're talking newborns. We're talking infants. This became a phenomenon. They became very popular, these postcards, and they do depict children sat in cabbage patches. And then, of course, you've got Alice Guy, who you mentioned, who was the first female movie actress, director, and producer, who came out with two movies, one called Midwife to the Upper Classes and the other one, The Cabbage Patch Fairy. And what's interesting with those is not only is the first narrated movie featuring babies in a cabbage patch, but what's interesting to anybody who wants to watch these movies, and they're out there, they're on YouTube, is how they handle the babies. They pick them up by their limbs and just plonk them on the ground. These are people that don't appear to have handled a child before.
Yeah.
It's weird to watch. It's actually uncomfortable to watch how they handle. And the story is what is depicted in the postcards. Some of these early postcards show what appears to be a middle-class couple going to a cabbage patch and buying a child, buying a baby, and that is exactly what happens in the Cabbage Patch Fairy with Alice Guy Blanche. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean that's strange because you would think if we were around, we were having children and having families, So the people before that, were they? I don't know. I think you mentioned about giants possibly living longer years. I think humans were living longer, and
Yeah.
we basically weren't reproducing. And somehow maybe these Cabbage Patch ones, they've been altered in some way to
Yeah.
start us reproducing ourselves, and almost having to get taught.
Yeah.
sex education.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and which is why I mentioned earlier on the World's Fairs, the photos of the World's Fairs that you can find. You won't see children in them. There aren't any. And then when you look at if you look at one of these videos, sorry, it's not a video, is it? It's a very old movie of Alice Guy. It's like they've not seen a baby before.
Yeah.
And then we had the incubator babies. Martin Cooney, who suddenly becomes an expert in and invents the incubator with no doctorate, no actual training or qualification, invents the first incubator, and now on display at all the world's fairs across the world are babies, and in each one they say the babies were on loan. In America, they were all on loan from New York. In London, they were on loan from Paris. Where did this sudden influx of premature babies come from? I think they were grown. I think these babies were grown. And because a lot of them were for sale, you could buy one. Again, at these world fairs, you could buy one of the babies from the incubators.
So they're not necessarily on loan then.
Exactly. So their own narrative
Yeah.
doesn't actually tie up, but then it doesn't with most things. And once you look into it, a lot of these contradict, as do if you look into who built. Perhaps if you find the oldest building in the city or town where you live, that the narrative behind whoever the architect was might make sense. But where it falls apart is when you look into the other buildings that are lesser known. You'll find that 9 times out of 10, there'll be 1 or 2 at least where the person wasn't even born when the building was erected, as far as they're telling us. Obviously, for me, they're a lot older and they were founded or found dead and empty.
And then Australia, when you look at Australia, some of the buildings there are unbelievable, but it's like only 40 years or something after white man supposedly arrived, and then they're building these huge buildings instead of establishing a basic, it's like a city almost. And again, it was like criminals that were supposedly built some of them.
Yeah, just happened to be master stonemason.
Yeah. So
yeah, it doesn't make any sense, does it?
And again, were the convicts going to Australia? Maybe it was babies or whatever getting sent there just to repopulate.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. There's people that I speak to that have actually looked at some of the cages or crates that the criminals were put in when they were transported over, and you couldn't get an adult in one. Okay. Even if you were able to bend them into, literally snap them in half, they still wouldn't fit. Right. And so, I think it's babies that they're imported. And in some of the early paintings of Australia, where someone's actually painted, and I can't remember the name of the artist, but I put the picture in my book, where you can see the first ships arriving when the British colonised, and there were windmills and buildings in the background. Well, they had to already be there, and it's not just one artist. There are quite a few early paintings of Australia where you can see civilization, and oddly things that look very much like cathedrals and churches, but also windmills too. And I found that quite interesting. And of course, it just looks to me like you're looking at anywhere else in the world. That if someone had removed Australia, I think it's Sydney in particular that these paintings are of. If you removed Sydney and put Holland or somewhere in England, somewhere in America, you wouldn't know. Yeah. They're all the same. It looks like the Tartarian civilization or the old world all used the same technology to build. They understood and shared the information on how to build and how to construct things of beauty, but also things that worked.
That actually, the Greco-Roman kind of design. That's
the Greco-Roman. Yeah, and
Again,
star forts is another one to look at.
yeah. So these are given attributes of the Roman Empire or whatever, but it's actually the Tartarian Empire, and that whole Roman
Yeah,
could just be a story again.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, you can look at anywhere. I mean, Tasmania, New Zealand, Samoa. These countries have the same Greco-Roman buildings, and why? What are we saying, that the architects had all travelled and seen the same stuff? No, it was a completely different civilization that built in a particular way, but as I just said a moment ago, if anyone wants to look at star forts, the narrative to those is that they are defensive fortresses. Yet some of them are in places where there is no logical purpose for that, and one, Jefferson, just off the Florida Keys, would serve no military purpose whatsoever. They're all the shape of a star. They all bounce the vibration and frequency. Sorry, inside the internal, inside one of these, the walls emit a frequency of 528 hertz, which is the frequency of all living matter. The Earth itself vibrates on that frequency. But more interestingly, they align to constellations.
All right.
What defensive benefit is that?
So what do you think the purpose of the star forts were?
Oh, centers of well-being.
All right.
Yeah, centers of well-being. So places that you would go to. I don't know whether or not that was something that you had to pay for, whether they were cities people built and lived within, but certainly by being inside one of those and living inside one of those, then I don't imagine you have to see the local GP very often.
Yeah.
Because everything was balanced. I mean, Raymond, for those who don't sort of understand much about organs and frequency, they just need to look at Raymond Royal Rife and see what he was doing and what he achieved with destroying cancer cells by changing the frequency emitted to somebody that had been diagnosed with cancer, and we know that they do heal, and that everything, like Tesla apparently said, everything is ultimately frequency, vibration and frequency, everything.
It's like these bells that got removed in the centres for part of the war effort or whatever. They were basically, again, that probably a certain tone that was cleaning us out, tuning us out.
Yeah, that's right. They changed. Ultimately, they changed to 440 hertz, which was the Rockefeller Institute. Got them all changed to become. He got the whole world to have a worldwide standard of 440 hertz. There was no reason for it to be 440 hertz, because I believe there were 432 before, or 428. I always get those round the wrong way.
432, yeah.
432. So we go from 432 to 440. Why? And they were melted down to make ammunition. Well, why not put them back? Why not put them back to 432? Why 440? Well, because that emits a feeling of distress. They bastardized literally what the church was. What the pipe organs did and what the bells did.
Yeah, I don't think they're liking what we're talking about, because you're going a bit pixelated just now. But
yeah, I bet. Yeah.
We're going to wrap it up very soon, but I was going to ask you, I mean, we've got the internet these days, and surely they must have been aware of the power that has given us for maybe a shortened time or whatever, but we've got the access to this information that we never had access to before, so we're finding out all this stuff. But with the announcement of the Great Reset in 2030, what do you think's ahead in the few years? We touched on it earlier, but do you think it's time for another clear out of humanity, and basically are we facing a bleak future, or what's your kind of prediction?
Well, that depends on who you talk to, and I'm very much on the fence, because for me, I'm approached by a number of people that tell me that they're going to wipe out this civilization, and we're going to start again, and that the elite, or the parasites as I prefer to call them, because they are by definition parasitic, are living off other people's hard work. You know, we are we are the debt slaves, aren't we? So the parasites are going underground. We're all going to be wiped out. A series of natural disasters. I mean, look at what's happening in America right now. And if you want to look at Hollywood and natural, and they never are. And I think they've been using direct energy weapons for a long time. And there is proof that you know, there has been some sort of nuclear explosion, war, or attack going right back to you know, thousands of years ago, where they found nuclear glass around the pyramids. And the Black Pyramid, incidentally, has you know, traces of it being scorched, and they still find nuclear glass around that. So I think there's going to be a series of events. They'll rebuild these cities. They'll be the 15-minute cities. What will happen to us, I don't know. I would like to think that I'll live long enough to be waiting outside of one of these bunkers for them to come out when they think it's all safe, that we're going to take control of the bunker. But people keep trying to convince me, and I am, as I said, on the fence with this, that the white hats, the good guys, are actually going to come out on top. And the reason that we've seen certain people die recently, you know, we saw Jacob Rothschild go. One of the children have gone. I can't remember his Christian name. Another Rothschild went recently. The Pope's ill. Charles is on his way out, apparently, and so on. So apparently they've been got at, and these people have been replaced. And Trump's a good guy. Trump is going to turn it all around. And that everything's going to be a-okay, and that this reset is actually about us raising our frequency and raising ourselves spiritually into a higher dimension. And that's what this reset's about. I don't share the same optimism. I think that what they're doing, I think we're going to probably have another pandemic. You know, they keep trying to get us scared of the latest, you know, they keep pumping out this bollocks, don't they, that there's going to be this outbreak or that one. And then, of course, there'll be a vaccine, and they'll crank 5G up a bit more. And I think we're going to see a bit more activity going on. But I also think they're running out of time, and that's why they're doing quite a lot at the moment to keep us in fear. There's a lot of things going on. And I do think that they're rushing, they're panicking. I think they're running out of time. They haven't got long, have they? If we're looking at Agenda 30, they've not got very long to destroy everything before their little 250-year period is over. And, you know, Satan's little season's gone, and we're back into, hopefully, another period of enlightenment, balance, and harmony. So I don't know. I'd like to be more positive about it, but I can't help but be worried for the future. But for me personally, and I keep pushing my wife on this one, but she wants to be near the children, especially one of them's getting married next January, and we think grandchildren are going to come quickly after that. I want to bugger off to Portugal. From everything I've researched, that is the place to be. Right. I want to be up in the mountains and just sit back. And as they said on Shaun of the Dead, for anybody who's ever watched it, I'm going to sit back and wait for the whole thing to blow over.
Sounds like a plan.
Probably literally too.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's possibly something to that. Yeah, getting up in the mountains, and possibly if you've got some kind of cave to go into for who knows what happening.
Well, we go in containers. We're going to containers, but dig down, put the containers into the ground, actually dig them in.
Yeah.
I've got somebody who used to actually install North Sea oil pipelines to come with me and join me, and with his wife, and obviously me and my family. I'm trying to get Richard Vobes to join me, but he says he refuses to have a passport. He will not bow down and have a passport. That's what I want to do. I'm sort of not that far away from being able to do that. But for as much as I want to live off grid and have no connection to the system, of course I need fiat currency. I need a bloody Wi-Fi connection as well. I'm writing my next book. I need the internet. Do you know, it's
So we get used to the system. It's hard to imagine life without it.
I know, and I built up a library. Whenever I stumble across a second-hand bookshop, I'll go in there and try and find anything I can that's as old as possible, and old encyclopedias, old reference books and atlases, and old storybooks. You know, the first editions of Hans Christian Andersen and the Brothers Grimm, because sooner or later they're going to turn this lot off.
Yeah,
we'll lose all of our books. We'll lose all of our music, all of our photographs. So I'm also printing them off too, printing photos off, and I'm trying to go back to more of an analog state in preparation for there being some huge crash and we lose everything.
So have a physical copy of a book. There was that movie, was it, or book? Fahrenheit 451 or something. Where
yeah,
had to remember a book.
yeah, but I do. So I write.
Right.
All of my books are written, and then I type them, and of course the notebooks that I write contain a lot more information than I write in the books, because there are a lot of thoughts in here and things that don't go anywhere. I've got something here, for example, which I haven't even decided whether or not I'll put inside the book. In Dorset, England, until the 1950s, babies were said to be brought to the house by doctors in a black bag. So it's full of stuff that might not make it in the book. So hopefully, if they do turn everything off, what I'm left with will be a little bit more than what I've managed to digitally write and have published.
Because I know you have been debating what your next book is. Have you finally settled on that? I think you have, haven't you? You've put it out there.
Yeah, and like with the first one, Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, I wanted people to pick that up, that perhaps rather than having to know a bit about Tesla and a bit about the Cabbage Patch babies, that anybody would pick it up, because they might understand or recognize Tesla as probably being a car manufacturer, and then also recognize the Cabbage Patch Kids and referencing that in their minds to the dolls, so it would appear to a wider audience. And this one I've used a little bit of Star Wars. So this one is Rise of the Clones, the Cabbage Patch Kids.
So you're going to go more into that?
Yeah, I've gone full steam. I'm actually halfway through the third chapter, but what I'm doing at the moment is purchasing through various websites some original artwork of the actual postcards that were in circulation, so I can get higher resolution copies. And the hardback I'm going to print in colour to give these postcards some justice. And then the paperback will be in black and white for people who, you know, are on a bit more of a budget and perhaps have already seen the cards and can see them online if they want to. But I suppose the hardback will be more of a coffee table book.
Yeah, I do like having a good quality, nice colour pictures. We've got a lot of pictures in this book as well.
Yeah, it's just the problem with that one was that if I went for the option colour, it became a little bit, the price became a little bit, I thought, too high. So learning a little bit more about publishing as I've gone along, I think that the paperback needs to be affordable to anybody, and the hardback printing colour. So for the people who really want those postcards in colour and perhaps, as I said, as a coffee table book, I thought I would just go for it. But also audiobook. There's an audiobook being done at the moment for the first one. That should be ready at the end of the month. And then I'll do an audiobook for the second. But I don't know what the third book's going to be on yet. But it will be one of the subjects within the book you've got. The idea was that I put a little bit of information on each part of the Tartaria conspiracy in one book, and then expand upon each chapter that's gritty in a much bigger book, a book of its own as I go along. So I will do one on Tesla, and because I'm still waiting for somebody out there to provide me with video footage of him. I've asked and looked everywhere. I've even contacted his museum, and no one has anything. Nothing.
Well, they don't have any.
Nothing.
Yeah, there's a
Bizarre,
few,
isn't it? Plenty of
there's only,
Edison and Einstein.
yeah, there's only a few pictures, isn't there? There's not
There
even
is,
that
and we
much.
all know the same one. I mean, the one I used on the cover of the book comes from one of the most famous images where he's side on, and then we see quite a popular one of an emaciated old man
Yeah,
towards the end. And the ones of him as a child, there's no way of knowing what we're looking at.
and
But it's interesting, isn't it, that there's no video footage of
you've
it.
got a good Facebook group we mentioned earlier, and in it you posted something about Frank Zappa being Tesla.
Yeah, yeah. Is he reincarnated? You mentioned earlier on. I mean, I don't sort of go on about it. We're obviously running out of time, but the interesting thing with Tesla is that it was Donald Trump's uncle John that went in to seize the paperwork and documents from Tesla's hotel room. The only files he never handed over were the files on his research into time travel. And then you've got the adventures of Baron Trump,
Yeah,
and now you've got Elon Musk as what is he? What role have they given him? Chief of Staff.
yeah,
They claim that he now has the paperwork, the files on time travel. So there's something in that. And the Frank Zappa theory is that Nikola Tesla went back to his childhood, brought back the childhood version of himself, and that is Frank Zappa.
really.
That's the theory. I don't know.
Yeah,
There'll be people out there say that's ridiculous, but of course they won't be able to prove otherwise. They'll just say it's ridiculous.
yeah,
And we can all say that. But what we actually need is someone to say that's ridiculous because I met Nikola Tesla. Here's a photo of me with him.
yeah,
And of course they can't do that. But a lot of people will shoot you down for a number of things, but they don't do it without. They don't do that and provide anything to back up what they're saying. So mine are theories. To disprove a theory, unfortunately, you need fact, and not a lot of people can provide that.
to me, it's always interesting to get different perspectives and ideas, and just hold them as an idea, and that could be true, that could be true. Even contradicting ideas, you could say, because if you shut your mind off immediately, where you're not going to open it up and learn any more, but you have to be a little bit analytical and critical, but at the same time, not just dismissive.
Yeah, I'm happy for anybody to to approach me and say, email, message me on Facebook, whatever, and say you're wrong about this. But because I want to be corrected, because I want to know what the truth is. And a lot of my stuff, as I've said in the book and the post that I put out, that this is just theories. These are my thoughts. But don't tell me I'm wrong, and then not tell me why, and then prove anything. I'd like to be told, well, actually, you're wrong about Tesla. He did exist. But you can't leave it there. For me to put out there that I'm wrong and my theory has been disproven, this is why. People aren't going to accept that unless they actually can substantiate it. So you can't just go around saying, well, this bloke's chatting shit. He doesn't know what he's talking about. All of his theories are nonsense. Why?
Yeah.
My answer to that is, okay, I'll stand corrected, but you're going to have to give me more than just your opinion.
Yeah.
And also the fact that I have not been able to find any video footage of him at all. For someone to say that he does exist, and someone said to me once, he didn't like having his photo taken. What? He was shy. That's why there's no video footage of it. You're going to have to do a bit better than that.
Yeah.
He
never had sex or something like that as well. Well,
same as Einstein. Yeah, Einstein didn't either. Yeah.
You had a wife.
He did, which was his cousin. Well, he married twice,
Oh,
but the second wife was his cousin. But she worked at the patent office, and some people would believe that it was actually her that was coming back with all of these inventions, giving them to Albert. And off Albert, who was quite a well-known cross-dresser, would work on those theories. And he was, if you like, the Nikola Tesla. He came out with all of the theories, but it was his wife. But at the time, we lived in a time when his wife wouldn't have been listened to the same way he was. But yeah, it's strange, isn't it? They both died virgins, which is bizarre, isn't it? Absolutely bizarre. Yeah. So I don't know what that's about, but Nikola Tesla believed that it's what enabled him to be productive and stay within constant communication and balance and connection with the planet. The ether was the fact he was pure.
If he lived.
Exactly. Yeah. And strange,
we...
isn't it? Because you'd think out there somewhere he had a sister, apparently. So let's get in touch with a niece or nephew, and they can tell us all about him. Where are they?
Yeah.
Where are they? Not a single living relative.
How can people get a copy of your book?
Well, they can, unfortunately, and I had no option other than to do this, but they can buy it on Amazon. No one. I spoke to several publishers. They wouldn't touch what I was writing. But they could also, so they can get hardback, paperback, ebook on Amazon. All they got to do is type in Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids. Or they can buy a signed copy directly from me. So they can email me. And they can contact me on Facebook. I'm still signing and sending copies out every week, and I send them all over the world as well. So some places they seem to take up to 42 days was the longest to arrive. By that time, I'd sent them another copy. But I did have a strange one the other day. Someone in Ohio contacted me and said, "I'd like to buy a signed copy of your book." I said, "Oh, brilliant, no problem. Here's my PayPal details." And they said, yeah, they just they just hired it for 2 weeks from their local library in Ohio. So that's quite strange. But yes, I send them everywhere. So if they want a signed copy, get in touch directly. Otherwise, it is Amazon.
And what's your email address?
GuyPeterAnderson@gmail.com. That's
cool. And I put a link to your Facebook group in the comments there, and it's just basically Tesla and the Cabbage Patch to do a search for that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's been great having you on. A really interesting topic, and I look forward to reading your next book once I've finished.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Billy.
No worries.
Thank you
very much. So thanks everyone for watching, and I'm back next Thursday, I think, with Matt Landman to talk about EMFs and the like. So we'll chat then. Thanks very much. Cheers for now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.